Some people walk into a room and instantly sense what no one else notices, whose eyes are hiding sadness, whose smile feels forced, which story is masking an unspoken anger. They detect the tension hanging in the air, hear the sound of deception even when no words are spoken. This ability doesn't come from luck or basic communication skills. It's the product of a deeper, more refined cognitive mechanism, as if their mind is programmed to pick up every invisible signal. Yet this gift carries a heavy price. Seeing too much is a paradox. Once you clearly perceive what others overlook, you can't go back to pretending you didn't see it. You can't engage in casual small talk when you know the other person is faking happiness. You can't remain silent when you sense betrayal quietly taking shape. This doesn't just set you apart, it makes you an uncomfortable mirror for those around you. Human interaction largely rests on unspoken agreements, ignoring the shadows together, believing convenient stories to preserve order. You shatter those agreements simply by being present. This ability isn't an illness. In fact, it could be an evolutionary leap in consciousness. But in the eyes of society, you become a destabilizing element, a presence whose sensitivity and accuracy disrupt the artificial balance. Those with this ability often find themselves isolated, not because they wish to avoid others, but because their very presence strips away the protective masks people wear. And when those masks fall, the natural reaction for many is to defend, to attack, or to leave. This is the most dangerous discovery, documented in psychological studies. When an individual's perception exceeds what the group is willing to accept, that person is pushed to the margins. The truth you see is unwelcome. It threatens the surface peace. And so, instead of being valued, you're more likely to be treated as the bearer of bad news, the one no one wants around when they're trying to maintain the status quo. The danger doesn't lie in the act of seeing itself, but in its consequence, the separation between you and the rest of the community. You no longer share the same picture as they do, no longer move to the same rhythm of awareness. You live in a different layer of consciousness, where every expression holds meaning, every sentence carries subtext, and every silence hints at an untold story. This makes it impossible to blend in naively or to fully believe in the curtain everyone else keeps in place. The hardest part is that you can't turn this ability off. You can't choose not to notice the flicker of envy in a meeting or the tension between two people trying to hide a conflict. Every small detail slips into your awareness and forms a complete picture. And when that picture is vastly different from the one everyone else wants to believe, you become the one who is out of sync. This is the psychological terrain where the most sensitive individuals live, a place rich in information yet filled with hazards. They see the truth behind carefully staged social interactions, and this vision can either save or destroy them. Without knowing how to manage it, they burn out from constantly absorbing and processing emotional information, all while pretending not to notice in order to maintain relationships. But if they learn to integrate and channel it strategically, they can become deeply influential, helping others face the truth without triggering extreme resistance. The problem is that most who possess this ability receive no guidance. They enter life like living radars, picking up every signal without a filter. It's like standing in a noisy crowd with every sound amplified to the maximum, no off switch, no escape, and no way to pretend you can't hear it. Fatigue builds, loneliness deepens, and eventually they start doubting themselves. Am I just too sensitive, overanalyzing everything? The truth is, they're not wrong. They're simply living in a dual reality. One is the social surface most people believe in. The other is the deeper layer of what's actually happening. When these two realities clash, you must choose: either blend into the crowd by shutting down what you see, or accept isolation to preserve your ability. Each choice carries its own cost. The difference between this ability becoming a curse or a gift comes down to one factor: whether you can control and direct it. The truth doesn't always need to be revealed immediately. Not everyone is ready to hear it or to withstand the reflection you offer. This ability isn't just about seeing, it's about selecting, choosing when, with whom, and how to share what you've perceived. Once you understand this principle, you'll stop getting pulled into unnecessary conflicts. You'll protect your energy and inner peace instead of becoming a target for attack. Seeing much doesn't mean saying everything. Knowing much doesn't mean changing everything. Real power lies in holding on to your ability to observe without letting it destroy your life, and in turning it into a tool for creating value rather than a cause for isolation. The ability to see what others miss is a double-edged sword. If you let it control you, it will sever connections and push you into solitude. But if you control it, it becomes the key to unlocking doors most people don't even know exist. And from there, you don't just see the world more clearly, you learn how to guide it toward what is truer, deeper, and more enduring. Imagine walking into an unfamiliar room where no one has spoken yet, and you can already feel the atmosphere. You instantly know who is lying, who is hiding sadness, who is holding on to a grudge. No questions, no prolonged observation. Everything appears as clearly as if someone had just whispered the whole truth in your ear. This isn't ordinary communication skill or logic-based inference. It's like a permanently switched-on sixth sense, scanning every glance, every frown, every silence. And once you have it, you can't turn it off. You can't pretend not to see. You can't force yourself to overlook it. This ability becomes part of you, and at the same time it sets you apart in ways others struggle to accept. Understand this. When you see through what others keep hidden, you accidentally break society's silent agreements. Every group, every collective survives on things everyone knows yet no one says. They pretend everything is fine to preserve harmony and keep the surface picture from cracking. But you, through presence alone, make the fractures visible. You don't create discord, you perceive what already exists. This phenomenon has a name: mystical participation. It means the boundary between you and the surrounding environment becomes blurred. You don't just hear what people say, you absorb their feelings, their fears, the memories they'd rather not revisit. You carry all of it as if it were your own. The more sensitive you are, the more easily you slip into this state, and the harder it becomes to distinguish which emotions truly belong to you and which you've unconsciously taken on for others. When the participation runs too deep, you feel constantly exhausted, not from overwork, but from endlessly processing a massive load of emotional and psychological signals that aren't yours. Stay near someone long enough and you start to feel anxious when they're anxious, angry when they're angry, sad when they're sad. The unnerving part is that most of the time you don't realize those feelings aren't your own. Because of this, groups tend to react to you. They sense you see too deeply. You feel too much. They may not say it, but they keep their distance or discreetly exclude you from situations where they'd feel exposed. It isn't hatred. You're simply touching the territory they're not ready to face. The most important thing to remember: this blending isn't your choice. It happens naturally, like a door that's always open, which is exactly why you must learn to close it when necessary. Not everyone deserves or is safe enough for you to let their contents flood into you. Without boundaries, you gradually lose yourself, not because someone deliberately takes you away, but because you let everything rush in without filtering. Picture living in a house with the door always open, where anyone can bring their belongings in and leave them there. At first you think you're helping, and then one day you realize the house is crammed with things that aren't yours. That is what it feels like when mystical participation goes unmanaged. Recognize that this gift is both precious and dangerous. It can help you understand people profoundly and connect at a level others cannot reach. It can also erode you from the inside, leaving you depleted and unmoored. The difference lies in whether you know how to be selective. You can't change the fact that you feel more deeply than most, but you can change how you respond. You can stand in a room and sense every emotional current without being carried away. You can observe without blending, receive without absorbing, and choose when to open that door. If you recognize yourself in this story, start with something simple. Whenever a strong emotion arises, ask, "Does this truly belong to me?" That single question helps you keep what is yours and return what isn't. Otherwise, you'll keep living inside someone else's storyline and forget your own. When you possess the ability to see through another person's facade, the first thing you trigger in them is not gratitude, it's a sense of threat. The moment they realize you can see the part of themselves they're trying to avoid, their mind is forced to choose between two paths: either face that darkness with courage and integrate it, or attack the mirror that reflects it. Most people, out of fear or lack of readiness, will choose the second path. This is the mechanism of projection, when an individual or group pushes their own darkness outward and assigns it to someone else. You did not create the selfishness, deceit, or resentment they carry, but when you see it and reflect it back, you become the place where they unload all responsibility. In their eyes, you are the source of instability, the cause of the problem, even though in reality you are only revealing a truth that has long existed. This process unfolds subtly, almost instinctively. Someone might smile to your face but then find a way to exclude you from the group. They might suddenly turn cold, irritable, or openly attack you with baseless accusations. These are not reactions to who you truly are, but reactions to themselves, to the shadow they cannot accept and have unwillingly glimpsed through your gaze. In social groups, this phenomenon evolves into something even more dangerous. You become the scapegoat. Every problem the group cannot or will not address gets assigned to you. Unspoken conflicts, hidden tensions, repressed dissatisfaction, all of it finds a way to land on your shoulders. Not because you caused any of it, but because your presence forces people to feel its existence. Removing you becomes the quickest way to restore the illusion of peace within the group. The danger lies in the fact that this often happens silently, without any honest conversation. You just start noticing changes. Less friendly looks, fewer invitations into conversations, whispers that surface only when you're not around. Sometimes a new story is even invented to justify pushing you out, a story everyone knows isn't entirely true, but is easier to accept than admitting they can't handle the truth you carry. Those who have been through this often describe it as feeling abandoned in the middle of a desert. You stand there with a clear understanding of what's happening, yet you cannot change how others perceive you. The more you try to explain, the more you reinforce the image they've assigned. Negative, troublemaker, someone who always sees the worst in things. In reality, you're simply seeing things as they are. The irony is that the same ability that gets you excluded is the very thing that prevents you from lying to yourself. You see the cause, you understand the motives, and you recognize that you are being used as a vessel for the group's unprocessed inner tension. But knowing doesn't make you immune. Prolonged isolation can drain you, shake your belief in your own worth, and even lead you to wonder if perhaps you really are the problem. This is when the greatest danger emerges. You start to identify with the shadow others have projected onto you. If you don't catch it in time, this cycle can pull you into self-withdrawal and self-isolation. You avoid contact, stay silent, or even abandon your deep observational ability just to avoid being attacked. But that trade comes at too high a price. You lose not only the ability, but also your very essence. Breaking this cycle requires understanding one key principle. The darkness others project onto you is not yours, and you are not responsible for carrying it. Recognizing this helps you stand firm against attacks, refusing to be pulled into the group's blame game. Instead of trying to defend yourself endlessly, you maintain clarity and discernment, separating what truly belongs to you from what is being assigned to you. That does not mean you should publicly expose everything you see. Wisdom is knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. Not every truth needs to be spoken immediately, and not everyone is ready to receive it. Controlling how you share your perception is how you protect yourself from becoming the next target of projection. In environments where unconscious agreements run deep, your very existence is a challenge. If you don't know how to adjust, the group will react instinctively, isolating you to preserve the current structure. But if you can redirect your approach, you can remain in that environment without being caught in the cycle of exclusion. The risk of being projected upon and made a scapegoat is a reality for those with heightened awareness. But when you understand this mechanism, you are no longer defined by it. Instead of becoming a victim of exclusion, you can become the one who stays calm in the chaos, the one who, no matter how much others try to deny the truth, quietly stands firm, refusing to let their shadow block your light. If you belong to the group of people who see more deeply into the world around you, you may have noticed that this ability doesn't manifest the same way in everyone. Even among those with introverted intuition, the way you sense, process, and express what you perceive can be entirely different from others. Understanding which type you are will help you protect yourself and develop this ability into a strength instead of allowing it to become a burden. The first type is intuition, feeling. You don't just see the inner state of others, you feel it within your own body. When someone is anxious, you feel your own heart racing. When someone is sad, a heaviness appears in your chest. This empathy is so strong that the boundary between your emotions and theirs nearly disappears. The greatest risk is living in borrowed emotions without realizing it, leading to emotional exhaustion and a loss of direction. But if you learn to separate them, you can become someone with profound healing abilities, because you truly step into another person's emotional world and understand them from the inside. The second type is intuition thinking. Unlike the feeling type, you process the information you pick up with sharp analysis. You spot behavioral patterns, connect seemingly unrelated details, and draw conclusions before events unfold. You might foresee a relationship falling apart, a project failing, or someone heading toward a crisis not because of guesswork, but because you detect unconscious signals others miss. The risk is that you may be seen as negative or overly critical when voicing your predictions. But if you learn to communicate them with subtlety, you can become a guide, helping others see the road ahead and prepare more effectively. The third type is intuition, sensing. These are the people who can read another's body like an open book. You can detect fatigue before the person notices it themselves, recognize signs of tension in the tilt of a head or a quickened breath. Sometimes, you can even sense chemical changes in someone's body when they're in a certain emotional state. This ability makes you an early warning system for the health and psychological state of those around you. But without boundaries, you can fall into the trap of worrying on others' behalf, constantly staying on alert and finding it hard to relax. When managed well, you can help identify problems early and protect those you care about. The fourth type is pure intuition. This is the rarest group and also the most prone to overwhelm. You perceive many things at once, hidden emotions, bodily signals, behavioral patterns, but struggle to organize them into a coherent picture or to explain them to others. You live in a constant flow of unconscious information streaming in, and without a clear structure for processing, everything can overlap and drain you. The biggest risk is overload and a sense of disorientation. But once you learn to categorize the information, you can become someone with a panoramic perspective, combining all elements to understand a situation deeply. These four types aren't meant to label or limit you, they're here to help you understand how your intuition operates. Each type has its strengths and vulnerabilities. If your intuition, feeling, practice distinguishing between your emotions and those of others. If your intuition, thinking, find ways to share your predictions constructively rather than issuing blunt warnings. If your intuition sensing, learn to release tension and keep your body from constantly being in a state of alert. If your pure intuition, hone your skills in organizing information so you can turn your vast awareness into usable knowledge. The most important thing to understand is that no type is better than another. What matters is whether you are conscious of how you receive and process information. When you understand your own mechanism, you can protect yourself from being swept up in what doesn't belong to you, while using your ability to serve more meaningful purposes. If you recognize yourself in one of these four types, take it as a reminder to begin the journey of mastering your intuition, because when this ability is under control, it's not just a personal advantage, it can become a gift to those around you. And when you know exactly which type you are, you'll no longer be overwhelmed by what you see. Instead, you'll know how to use it as a compass to guide both yourself and others. Having the ability to see deeply and sense beyond the ordinary is a gift, but it is not an unconditional one. It comes with risks that, if you fail to recognize and manage them, will pull you into a cycle of exhaustion, isolation, and the loss of your own self. There are three greatest dangers that anyone with this ability must face. The first risk is breaking the collective's unspoken agreements. Every group, every community operates on things that everyone silently agrees to overlook. These could be unresolved conflicts, the shadow side of a person that everyone knows but never mentions, or truths that might disrupt the surface peace. When you notice and unintentionally reflect those things, you break those unspoken agreements simply by existing. You don't have to say a word sometimes, just a look or a well-timed silence is enough for people to realize you know what they're trying to hide. And the moment this happens, you become a destabilizing factor in their eyes, even if you had no intention of causing it. This is why many who possess this ability feel they are pushed to the margins, not because they are wrong, but because they have accidentally touched the group's forbidden territory. The second risk is psychological and existential isolation. When you see more, feel more deeply, your world no longer mirrors that of the majority. You engage in conversation, but realize you're operating on a different plane of awareness. You listen but find the surface-level stories inadequate to fill the inner space. This difference can gradually make you withdraw, simply because it's hard to find someone who truly understands your experience. Here, isolation isn't just about having fewer friends or less interaction, it's a separation in existence, the feeling of living in an entirely different reality where what is obvious to you is invisible to others. Without safe, deep connections, this isolation can easily turn into a sense of dislocation, even questioning the meaning of your existence in an environment incapable of empathizing with you. The third risk, and the most dangerous, is the dissolution of the self. When you are overly sensitive to the emotions and unconscious states of others, the boundary between me and them starts to blur. You absorb another person's anxiety, anger, or sadness as if it were your own. At first, you may think you're simply empathizing, but over time, you can no longer tell which feelings truly belong to you. This is the state of merging into the collective unconscious, where your personal identity is submerged. If this continues, you may lose your sense of direction, no longer recognize yourself, and lose the ability to make decisions based on your true needs. These three risks rarely appear immediately, they accumulate quietly over time. You don't realize you're breaking the collective's unspoken agreements until you're seen as difficult or disruptive. You don't realize you're isolating yourself until conversations feel hollow and you start avoiding people. You don't realize your sense of self is dissolving until one day you can no longer hear your own voice amid the chaotic noise of borrowed emotions. The key is to face these risks directly and act proactively instead of waiting for them to erode you. You need to learn how to regulate the frequency and intensity with which you open your intuitive channel. You don't need to tune in to everything all the time. Sometimes, staying silent and letting your mind rest is the best way to preserve your mental health. You need to build deep connections with those capable of empathy and who value your presence to counteract existential isolation. And above all, you must strengthen the ability to clearly distinguish what is yours from what you are unconsciously carrying for others in order to protect your identity and psychological boundaries. If you notice yourself stepping into any of these three danger zones, don't see it as a sign of weakness or failure. It's simply a reminder that the gift you carry requires a higher level of management skill. The ability to see deeply and feel intensely is not a curse, but it will become one if you allow it to operate without limits. When you know how to hold your boundaries, cultivate healthy connections, and respect your own inner space, these three risks will no longer be threats. Instead, they will become catalysts for growth, allowing you to wield your ability with wisdom. Possessing heightened sensitivity does not automatically mean you know how to live with it. Without learning to control it, you can easily become overwhelmed by the very ability you hold. The individuation process is the path that allows you to integrate this capacity into your life in a healthy way, transforming it into a tool that shapes your identity and serves your purpose, rather than a source of exhaustion and isolation. The first step is recognition and differentiation. You must clearly identify which emotions, thoughts, and desires are truly yours, and which are ones you've absorbed from your environment. This may sound simple, but demands a high level of awareness. Train yourself to pause whenever a strong emotion arises and ask, "Is this coming from me or from someone else?" If the feeling fades when you leave a person or group, it likely isn't yours. This skill of differentiation is like installing a filter for your mind and emotions, preventing you from dissolving into the unconscious material of others. One effective supporting method is intentional separation time. Dedicate a portion of each day to stillness, no interaction, no stimulation from social media or outside information. When you detach from the collective emotional field, you can hear your own voice more clearly. This is not negative isolation, but a form of mental hygiene, restoring your capacity for clear discernment. The second step is integrating your personal shadow. When you can clearly see the shadow in others, it's easy to feel cleaner or more evolved than they are. But the truth is, everyone has their own darkness traits, impulses, and desires they'd rather not admit. The more you deny your own, the more strongly you will react when you see them in others. In contrast, when you face and accept that you too are capable of selfishness, anger, jealousy, or deceit, you stop reacting so sharply to those behaviors in others. Instead of judging, you observe calmly. This is where perception becomes wisdom. You not only see, you understand, and you remain unmoved. A simple practice is to write down what irritates you in others and ask yourself, does this exist in me, even in a small way? This recognition is not about self-condemnation, but about removing the barrier between you and the world. When your own shadow is integrated, your observation becomes more refined and provokes less resistance in those you encounter. The third step is conscious participation. This means you still connect with others, still sense their inner states, but you control the degree and timing of your engagement. You learn to hold another's energy temporarily to offer support, but you don't allow it to remain within you. It's like borrowing a book to read and then returning it when finished, instead of keeping it and letting it pile up in your home. To achieve this, you need to develop a psychological container, the ability to maintain your identity and boundaries even in highly charged emotional environments. Imagine yourself as a glass vessel. Inside, it can hold hot or cold water, but the outer shape remains unchanged. When you leave the situation, you pour the liquid out and return to your original state. This requires consistent practice, as your instinct may be to absorb and hold on. When these three steps work together, you are no longer a passive recipient of the world's influence. You become the one actively shaping how you interact with it. You realize you can stand in a room full of emotional chaos and still hold inner peace. You can see difficult truths without feeling the need to voice them immediately, because you understand that timing and delivery matter as much as the truth itself. The individuation process is not a destination, but a lifelong journey. Each time you sharpen your skill of differentiation, face your shadow, and practice conscious participation, your ability ascends to a new level. You become less overwhelmed, less misunderstood, and most importantly, less inclined to believe you are wrong for carrying a gift the world is not yet ready to receive. When this exceptional ability is integrated, it becomes a compass guiding you toward wise decisions and meaningful impact. You not only see what others miss, you know how to use that vision to guide, to heal, or to protect. You no longer feel the need to fight against your nature in order to fit in, because you've learned how to live in harmony with it. And more importantly, you recognize this gift was never a curse. The curse only exists when you let it operate without conscious direction. Once you master it, the very ability that once made you feel alone becomes the key to a life that is clearer, deeper, and more meaningful than anything you could have imagined. Throughout history, there have been people who possessed heightened perception like you. Some learned to turn it into a source of strength, while many others allowed it to pull them into a spiral of isolation and collapse. Understanding these stories will help you see the road ahead clearly, where to go and which turns to avoid. There have been those who saw the true nature of society, sensed the conflicts the majority wanted to hide, but wielded that ability like a blade. They exposed the truth harshly, triggering defensiveness, resistance, and eventually rejection. The outcome was often loneliness and depletion. In contrast, others with the same ability chose a different path. They still spoke the truth, but in a way others could hear. They used their gift to guide and awaken awareness rather than to attack. This is clear proof that it's not the ability itself that determines your fate, but how you choose to use it. To survive and thrive with this ability, you need to build principles of connection. First, find the ones who understand. Individuals capable of receiving the depth of your perception without becoming defensive. They might be those who have gone through deep journeys of self-awareness or simply souls mature enough to accept their own hidden sides. These will be the anchors that help you maintain balance when the outer world cannot empathize. Next, connect with those who are on the path of personal growth. They may not possess the same ability, but they are open to exploring themselves. When you share your perspective, they won't see it as a threat, but as an opportunity to learn. These relationships will sustain a two-way exchange, both giving and receiving. Also, do not overlook the natural containers, people who may not have deep awareness but have the capacity to remain emotionally stable even when faced with hard truths. They are like solid ground, allowing you to share without fear of being misunderstood or pushed away. Once you have your connection principles, apply a strategy I call selective revelation. Start with small, easily acceptable observations. Watch the listener's reaction. Are they curious or defensive? If they open up, you can gradually go deeper. If they close off, stop. Revealing everything you see all at once is not always effective. It can make others feel intruded upon and react strongly. Think of what you see as a valuable gift, and a gift must be given to the right hands at the right time. On the path to mastering this ability, you will pass through 4 stages of transformation. The first stage is recognizing without overwhelm. You accept that you have a unique ability, but do not let it weigh you down. Instead of seeing it as a burden or something that makes you too different, you regard it as a natural part of yourself. The second stage is integrating without isolating. You learn to use your ability skillfully, maintaining connection with others instead of withdrawing for fear of being misunderstood. At this stage, you begin to realize you don't have to choose between being yourself and belonging to a group. You can do both if you know how to adjust. The third stage is serving without self-sacrifice. You turn your ability into a gift for the community, using it to illuminate, guide, or support others, but without compromising your own safety or mental health. You know your limits, you know when to step in and when to step back. The final stage is leaving a legacy without attachment. You use your ability to contribute to the growth of the collective, but you don't cling to the need for recognition or immediate results. You understand that the seeds of awareness you plant may sprout long after you are gone. Looking at historical examples, you'll see a common thread among those who integrated successfully. They knew how to connect. They didn't stand apart and look down at the world they stepped in, participated, and used their ability to uplift rather than to tear down. They understood that the true value of this gift does not lie in seeing more, but in the ability to use what they see to create lasting change. And this is what you must remember. Heightened perception is not a reason to withdraw from the world. It is a reason to engage with it more deeply, more skillfully, and more consciously. When you pass through the 4 stages of transformation and apply the principles of connection, this gift will no longer be a burden. It will become the legacy you leave behind, even if you never seek acknowledgement. Possessing heightened perception and having learned how to integrate it does not mean you are forever safe. This path is not a one-time conquest followed by rest. It is a living process where, the moment you lose vigilance, you can slide back into being swept away. There are subtle traps that, if you fail to recognize them, can catch you before you realize it. The first trap is ego inflation. When your ability allows you to see what others cannot, it's easy to believe you know better than everyone else. This is when you unconsciously identify yourself with the role of the absolute truth holder. At first, you think you're only helping, but gradually, you turn what you see into a standard for judging others. When that happens, an ability that was once a tool for connection becomes a wall of separation, pushing you into self-imposed isolation. Maintaining humility, not the performative kind, but the deep understanding that you are only seeing from one angle, and that angle does not encompass the whole truth, is the only way to avoid this trap. The second trap is complete withdrawal. After experiences of being misunderstood, attacked, or isolated, you might decide to shut yourself off entirely from the world. You tell yourself no one is deep enough to understand, and that keeping your distance is self-protection. But in reality, this is a form of surrender. You abandon the chance to contribute, and also give up the opportunity to grow through interaction. Total retreat might offer temporary safety, but over time, it hardens you and robs you of the flexibility needed to live fully. The third trap is addiction to the helper role. When you clearly see the pain and fractures within others, it's easy to get pulled into saving them. This often begins from kindness, but without awareness, you can start defining your worth through being needed. You give all your time, energy, and focus to others while neglecting yourself. At that point, you are no longer helping from wholeness, you are clinging to your role to avoid facing your own inner emptiness. The final trap is re-immersion. Even after you've integrated your ability well, periods of stress, upheaval, or major loss can weaken your boundaries. You may begin absorbing emotions and unconscious states from others without realizing it, leading to fatigue and disorientation. The difference between someone who has never learned integration and someone re-immersed is this. You already have the tools to return to balance if you notice in time and apply them deliberately. To sustain integration, you need a personal awareness care system. First, maintain the habit of intentional solitude, not to hide, but to filter out what does not belong to you. Second, choose carefully when and where to use your ability. You don't need to have your emotional antenna fully extended at all times. Sometimes, staying silent and observing from a distance is the wiser choice. Third, keep working with your own shadow, because even when you've integrated well, the unacknowledged unconscious can still influence you. Fourth, stay connected to people who can reflect you truthfully and safely. They will serve as anchors when the environment around you becomes chaotic. And finally, find a creative outlet to release pressure. Writing, painting, music, or any form of expression that lets you discharge excess emotional data will help keep your mind clear. When you maintain these principles, your ability no longer feels like something you must control constantly. It becomes a natural part of your life. You stop feeling weighed down by what you see and sense, and instead begin to enjoy using it strategically. You'll realize that integration is not about trying to change your nature. It's about learning to pace it, direct its flow, and knowing when to let it rest. By the end of this journey, you will see one thing clearly. The gift you carry was never an inherent burden. The burden only comes when you allow it to operate unconsciously. When you learn to use it with clarity and intention, it becomes a sharp tool to navigate every aspect of life, from relationships to work to the most important decisions about your path. You are no longer stuck between fully blending in or completely separating. You learn to stand at the boundary, connecting deeply without losing yourself, observing clearly without being swallowed whole. And in that state, your ability serves not only you but radiates as a source of light for those ready to receive it. The journey of mastering this exceptional ability does not promise a final, perfect endpoint, because you will continue refining it throughout your life. But once you pass through the traps, sustain integration, and learn to live with this gift, you will find that you have transformed what was once a danger into the strongest foundation for growth, not only for yourself, but for everyone you touch along the way.